was stated in the lyric.
Even Al Yeckheim, the great chess player, who was also a notorious anti-Semite.
Once again, Max Kellerman, the super liberal Caucasian Jew, trying to turn the conversation into anti-Semitism. Once again, brothers, that is why the so-called Caucasian Jew loves to commandeer all of these racial discussions and the quote-unquote racial movements. They're the hidden hand behind all of these quote-unquote civil rights movements, because they're paranoid about people coming to an understanding of why certain sentiments and messages get pushed to the masses through the television, like forced interracial dating and acceptance of homosexuality, lesbianism, transgenderism, things of that nature, the worship of animals, so on and so forth. They're paranoid that people are going to find out that all of the record execs, all of the TV execs, when you look at many of these top corporations, their emblem, their logo always goes back to something that is an allusion to pagan mythology. Why is that? So they're worried that people are going to find out that they're the ones who are pushing Luciferianism on this society. So they always have to talk about anti-Semitism.
But had great chess games. What, are you supposed to not study his chess games? No, this is different. This is different because we are here playing her music, and in her catalog were songs, with terrible and racist messages. So it's not simply like, well, we're going to throw out the baby with the bathwater because she did some things in her personal life we don't like or held some repugnant views. She put them out in her music, and there are many renditions of God Bless America that are great. Why do we need to play hers, particularly in a sport that wasn't integrated? It wasn't even integrated in 1947, but at least they let one black dude play in
Well, baseball actually had many black players in the 1800s. And what happened is that towards the end of the 1800s, they forbade all black players from continuing to participate in Major League Baseball. And it wasn't until Jackie Robinson in 1947 that they allowed the return of black baseball players. But there were many black players in the major leagues in the 1800s.
1947, Jackie Robinson, but wasn't more fully integrated until 10 years after that. In that sport, you want to pick a specific rendition of a song by a notorious racist who put out racist music? Do you really need to do that? No, we can change that tradition. If I may, I just want to add a few facts and then push you guys on a question. Kate Smith, as you point out, Stephen A., published some clearly and undebatably racist songs, or at least one in the 1930s. The one you did reference, Stephen A., there's some question about whether or not that was satire, because it was also sung by Paul Robeson, who was a civil rights activist as time went on. So Paul Robeson, I'm sorry. That particular one, Stephen A., there's some debate. There are some others that there is not.
Well, Ken, I have to stop you there, because if you were really trying to push Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman on their liberal views, then you should have followed up the statement about Paul Robeson singing that same racist song with a question towards them about why Paul Robeson, who was a noted quote-unquote civil rights activist in his day, why he would sing that song in the first place, unless it was already understood by him that it was some form of satire. That's how you should have followed up your statement, sir.
Not debate about. And then Max, you bring up other famous figures. We should just at least point these facts out. Kate Smith, I believe, holds the record for most war bonds sold to the United States of America. She helped raise $600 million during World War II to fight the Nazis. It would be $11 billion in today's money. But here's where I have to push you, and I'll start with you, Stephen A. We're holding a historical figure with 1930s actions to modern-day standards, and I agree with you. They were offensive no matter what, and given the time frame, no matter the decade. However, this has no end, this standard. So, for example, the Philadelphia 76ers have Ben Franklin featured in their logo. Ben Franklin was a slave owner. I think that we could all agree is more offensive even than singing racist lyrics. So should they remove Ben Franklin from their logo? Baseball itself, as you point out, Max, and hockey itself.
Well, they're not going to remove Ben Franklin from their logo because Ben Franklin is viewed as an inventor. He's also viewed as a Caucasian man from the North. And according to what people are taught in school, all white people from the North were good people.
Itself were not integrated until well after Kate Smith. Should baseball and hockey pay greater penalties themselves? I want to know where the line is and how you wash history.
Well, let me. Go ahead, Stephen, and then I want to take a stab at it.
Let me answer this question. Well, I'm going to give you perhaps one of the more honest answers you may not have heard from somebody. And the answer is, we just don't know.
Well, sir, if you don't know, then your position should not be as strong as it is or as strident as it is on Kate Smith. The point of you deciding to change or shift a paradigm is you should already have considered where it's going to go from there. That's what a leader does. If you don't have the ability to possibly prognosticate where a tide is going to shift to or turn to, should you initiate this paradigm shift, then you should not initiate it. You should not be involved.
Because it depends on the offended party. A lot of times people want to have like this standard, and there's nothing against that, and you want it to, it's like an umbrella policy, for crying out loud. It's applicable to everybody. Well, guess what? You know what? If black folks find that to be highly offensive, maybe back in the day there was nothing that they could do about it at that particular moment in time. Maybe as recently as the 70s and the 80s there was nothing they could do about it at that particular time. But somehow, some way, because of the heightened level of sensitivity that exists in today's society,
What does that really mean, though? The heightened level of sensitivity in today's society. What does that really mean? What that really means is that everyone is supposed to spend their entire life walking on eggshells. Now, keep in mind, Stephen A. Smith will be the same person who will rail and ramble on against quote unquote political correctness and everyone being so sensitive. But now he's talking about the heightened level of sensitivity in today's society. So one has to ask, which one is it? Or is it that we only have to accept sensitivity from certain demographics because only certain demographics matter? At the end of the day, brothers, my point is this. We cannot continue to try to live in a toilet bowl and turn it into a mansion. America is not meant to be a mansion for the so-called black man. There's a lot of shit in here because it's a toilet bowl. There are a lot of things that are never going to be repaired or fixed. And if our people were as concerned with getting themselves together and potentially starting our own society so that our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren did not have to deal with the same psychoses that our people today deal with, we'd be far better off. And for those of us who are so concerned about the opinions of the other races would certainly grow in stature or in elevation. Other people will look at so-called blacks and say, oh, wow, they finally stopped worrying about what we think about them, and they're finally getting their shit together. That's the only way to fix this. It's not about going back to 1934 and Kate Smith, some fat white bitch, singing God Bless America, who also sang a song about darkies and all this other shit. I mean, who gives a damn?
Folks are finally able to do something about it and absolutely took the opportunity to do just that. There's an individual, I think he works for the New York Times, by the name of Charles Blow, that was on the air just over the weekend, and he was talking.
Now, let me say this, of course, very quickly. If at the stadium they were playing Kate Smith's song talking about darkies, then yeah, you want that shit scrapped from the record. You can't play that. But for somebody to sing God Bless America and that version cannot play anymore because she also sang a racist song, I mean, come on, give me a break.
Talking about, you know what, black people were alive back then too, and black people were highly offended by certain things that may have transpired. You just couldn't find yourself in a position to do something about it because society has.
Let me say this also, because a lot of these so-called black people who want everybody to be so sensitive to blacks and the issues that our people have and how quote unquote sensitive our people are in general, you have to be very careful. Because if it were to start to be a tit for tat situation, I promise you, so-called black people going to lose. Our people going to lose. Because you know there's always some white boy out there who's going to pull up FBI stats on who's raping who more and who's killing who more. And this is how circular conversations start that lead nowhere. So-called black people are not solution oriented. Our people don't really want solutions. They just want to bitch and complain to the white man, because the rapport between the Caucasian and the so-called black man in America is very similar to a corrosive or acidic relationship between a man and a woman, with the white man playing the man and the so-called black man and woman playing the woman. Where it's like so-called black people believe that they're not being treated well enough. But the Caucasian, with him being the man and this being his house, his attitude is, if you don't like how I'm treating you, leave. Because I'm not changing for you. And deep down in the heart and the mind and the spirit of the so-called black man and woman, they don't want to leave because they don't have the confidence that they're going to be able to build up their own society. They don't have the confidence that other so-called black people are going to be on board. So basically, our people feel like they're trapped here. So they're trying to make the best of a bad situation. Because underneath all the blustering and talk about pro-blackity black this and the motherland that, 99%, I'm not even talking about 99% of black people, 99% of ardent pro-blacks will never in their life move back to so-called Africa.
As a whole wasn't receptive to provoking change the way that it is now. And so when you ask that question, there's no definitive answer comparing her to a Ben Franklin or anything like that. Speak to an historian about that, which I am not. I'm willing to concede that. But the fact of the matter is...
So if you're willing to concede that, Stephen A. Smith, and you're willing to concede that you're not going to apply the same pressure to have Ben Franklin removed that you would Kate Smith removed, why is your opinion valid if you're not going to be consistent?
Is that the offended parties in question are the ones that should be able to make that call.
Well, Stephen A. Smith, who exactly is offended? Was this campaign started by some pro-blackity black group somewhere and I missed it? Did the Black Lives Matter group, did they dig up some information on Kate Smith and say we need to have this woman's version of God Bless America stricken from the record at Philadelphia and at Yankee Stadium? Is that what happened? Or was this issue brought up by some super liberal Caucasian group or person?
If somebody said something offensive about the Jewish community, if they said something offensive about the Islamic community, if they said something offensive about the Catholic community or whatever, like we talked...
Stephen A. Smith, I have news for you, bro. The Catholic community, quote unquote, the Islamic community, quote unquote, those are religions. Those are not races. So-called black people, especially the wokety woke ones, they always step in a pile of shit when they start to speak about this issue because they don't even know what their race is. Our people confuse race with color with religion. And the reason why they do that is because deep down our people know that their actual race is directly associated with their culture. That's why they conflate all three together. But they don't know what their race is because they don't know what their culture is.
Talk about Catholic priests from time to time or whatever the case may be. You know what folks are going to stand up and say? The Catholics are going to stand up and say, let us judge them. The Jewish folks are going to stand up and say, let us judge them. Everybody, it's all dependent on the offended party.
This is what I would say.
Black folks are of the mindset that this is offensive. That is all that's needed.
This is what I would say. The good is weighed with the bad, Will. Joe Paterno did a lot of great stuff, but after the Sandusky scandal, statues got to come down. It's not
right, but Joe Paterno also was still alive when that was going on. Max Kellerman, that's Will Kane's point. Will Kane's point is that this shit was going on 80 years ago. So to say that you want to have this person's version of God Bless America removed, that's his point. How far back are you going to go? That's why he used the analogy or the comparison with Ben Franklin. You're bringing up Joe Paterno. Joe Paterno just passed a few years ago.
It's not that it obliterates the good he did. It's that the good is weighed with the bad. And I would say that when it comes to George Washington or Benjamin Franklin,
slave owners,
we have to deal with it. Like I don't.
But why do you just have to deal with it? How come you don't want to take their statues down? That's Will Kane's point. The issue with Will Kane is that he's not pushing the point enough because he's being facetious. Will Kane does not want Ben Franklin or George Washington's statues taken down, so he's going to just throw that point out there in the air and let it hang there. But if he really was trying to get the GOAT of Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman, he would have pushed for it. He should have asked them, do you think that a slave master's statue should remain up, yes or no? And that would have forced them to hold a position one way or the other.
I don't think that they get erased from the history books or they're not honored for the many things they did. Because what does that mean? What does that mean? Deal with it. Because of the context of their time, we don't take down the statues of George Washington.
Right, but that's Will Kane's point. His point is that in the context of her time back in the 1930s, that was more acceptable to make songs like that, whether they be serious or satire. That was the point of him bringing up that Paul Robeson also re-sang that song. It's very difficult to contextualize, the times from 80 years ago.
To Benjamin Franklin. However, history is watching. So, for example, when it came to choose sides and there was a war fought over it, then the Southern Confederate generals should never have a statue anywhere in this country.
I agree with that, because what they did was treason. But that's not the point of this conversation. What you're trying to do is create a red herring so that you can once again get on your soapbox and push your fake super liberal Caucasian Jew bullshit.
For their treason and for their fighting for slavery, they should be demonized in history and certainly never honored anywhere.
The Confederate generals, they were fighting for the autonomy of the Confederacy, just as much as the life choice of being a quote-unquote slave owner. There were many so-called blacks who fought on the side of the Confederacy as well, especially black slave owners.
That's not the case with Washington and Franklin. Now let's extend this to Kate Smith. The offended party at the time, African Americans.
Can we get some news clippings of some so-called black people who were offended by Kate Smith? Because as of right now, it's just Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman claiming that so many blacks were offended by Kate Smith's song about jigaboos or pickaninnies, whatever the hell she was singing about. I have news for you. There are many so-called black women who are offended by the songs of these rappers. Should the rappers no longer be able to make songs?
Had no say, had no voice, had no ability to stop those kind of songs from being popular. But history is watching. And just as she enjoyed great success and did many good things in her life, she is now paying because history has been watching.
Once again, Max Kellerman, you're making Will Kane's point for him. Should Ben Franklin and George Washington statues come down because they were slave owners?
And has its eye on her. She is now paying for it. So it's not a free ride forever simply because she got away with it early on.
But here's the thing, and I think you're both actually advocating the same standard. And Stephen A., you put a fine point on it. You said basically when the offended party says so, even if the offended party comes decades later. And my point to you is this, then nothing will survive. Nothing will survive because
I agree with that, sir.